The Hells Angels biker saw the little girl point at a rusted door, and inside lay a truth that could ruin kingdoms. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's dive into the story. It was an unusually cold evening in the small town of Cedar Ridge, a place where nothing ever really happened. The streets were quiet, the houses still, and the snow gently drifted from the dark sky. Jake Morrison, a seasoned Hells Angels biker, cruised down the narrow road, his Harley-Davidson growling beneath him like a beast on the prowl. His leather jacket, adorned with the unmistakable Hells Angels patch, shimmered in the dim streetlight. He wasn't in a hurry, just enjoying the solitude, the freedom of the ride, and the endless road ahead. His thoughts wandered back to his old life, the one before the club, the one before the scars, before the violence. But those thoughts were fleeting, quickly drowned out by the roar of the engine and the cold wind biting at his face. It was then that he saw her, a small figure standing at the edge of the road, her tiny hand pointing towards something in the distance. He slowed the bike, unsure whether it was just his eyes playing tricks on him, but as he approached, he saw her more clearly. A little girl, no older than 7 or 8, standing in the middle of nowhere, alone, staring at an old, rusted door buried beneath layers of snow and dirt. Jake's instincts screamed at him to keep going, to avoid getting involved. But something about her gaze, something in her eyes, stopped him. She wasn't scared. There was a strange calmness in the way she looked at him, as if she knew exactly what he needed to see. He killed the engine and slowly dismounted. "Hey there," Jake called out, trying to sound friendly, though his voice was rough from years of shouting over the roar of engines. The little girl didn't flinch. She just stood there, her small finger still pointing at the door. "It's in there," she said softly, her voice barely audible above the wind. "The truth. It's behind that door." Jake's heart skipped a beat. Truth? Behind a rusted door in the middle of nowhere? The words didn't make sense, but the certainty in her voice unnerved him. He followed her gaze, looking at the weathered door, half buried in snow and debris. It looked like it hadn't been touched in years. "What's behind it?" Jake asked, more to himself than to the girl. She didn't answer, just nodded slowly, her eyes never leaving the door. There was something about this moment that felt wrong, like stepping into a story that had already been written. Jake felt a chill that wasn't from the cold. The kind of chill that came from realizing you were about to uncover something that could change everything. He hesitated for a moment, then took a step forward. The little girl's voice broke the silence again. "It could ruin kingdoms," she said, her eyes now wide with a strange mixture of fear and certainty. Jake turned to her, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" The girl said nothing more. She simply watched him, as if waiting for him to make the first move. He approached the door slowly, his boots crunching in the snow, his mind racing. What could possibly be behind that door? And why had she pointed him towards it? He reached for the rusted handle, and with a single twist, the door creaked open. The air inside smelled stale, like dust and forgotten things. Jake stepped into the darkness, his heart pounding. The truth, whatever it was waiting for him in the shadows. And as he stepped further into the unknown, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was no ordinary discovery. It was something that could change everything. I opened the door, the rusty metal creaking loudly as it swung wide. A musty smell hit me like a wall, stale air mixed with something faintly metallic. My eyes adjusted to the darkness inside, but I couldn't see much at first. The small girl was still standing behind me, silent, watching. I stepped forward, my boots crunching on the dirt floor as I moved deeper into the room. The only light came from the dim glow of the streetlights outside, spilling through the cracks in the doorframe. The room was full of shadows, but there were shapes in the darkness. Boxes, old furniture, and something that felt wrong. I couldn't quite place it, but something about this room, about this moment, felt like it was part of a larger story, one I was only beginning to understand. I turned back to the girl. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice low. She didn't respond. She just pointed to the far corner, where a dusty old chest sat. It was small, unremarkable, but there was something about it that pulled at me. The air in the room seemed to thicken as I moved toward it, my heart racing. Is this what you were talking about? I asked, more to myself than her. She nodded slowly, her small face a mask of emotion I couldn't decipher. I crouched down in front of the chest, feeling the weight of the moment pressing down on me. My fingers brushed the surface, and it was colder than anything else in the room. I hesitated, then gripped the handle and pulled. The lid creaked open, and a blast of cold air hit my face. Inside, there was a small, leather-bound book, its pages yellowed with age. I reached for it, feeling the strange weight of history in my hands. As I lifted it out of the chest, I noticed something else. A small key, rusted with age, was nestled underneath. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. There was something unsettling about it, like it was a piece of a puzzle I wasn't ready to solve. I glanced back at the girl. What is this? I asked again, my voice a little more urgent now. She simply pointed to the key, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. My fingers gripped the key tightly as I turned back to the chest. There was another lock, smaller this time, on the side of the chest. It seemed to call out to me, urging me to use the key. Without thinking, I slid the key into the lock. It turned with a satisfying click, and the chest seemed to almost exhale, as if it had been waiting for this moment. Inside, there was a piece of paper, old and fragile, with handwriting scrawled across it. I unfolded it carefully, the paper crackling in my hands. The message was short, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. The truth is buried. Dig deeper. I stared at the words for a long time, trying to make sense of them. What truth? And why was it so important? The girl's eyes never left me, and I could feel her breath on the back of my neck as she stepped closer. What does it mean? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me for a moment, then simply turned and walked towards the back of the room. I stood frozen for a second, the weight of the book and the paper in my hands pulling me deeper into the mystery. There was no turning back now. I followed her, my mind racing with questions I wasn't sure I wanted the answers to. As I reached the back of the room, I saw something I hadn't noticed before. A small trapdoor in the floor, half covered by debris. The girl was already crouching beside it, her small hands pushing aside the old wood and dirt. We need to open this, she said, her voice calm but firm. My stomach dropped. The air in the room seemed to grow colder as I knelt beside her. We both reached for the edges of the trapdoor, our fingers brushing as we lifted it open. Below us, in the darkness, there was a stairwell leading down into what seemed like an endless void. I hesitated, my heart pounding in my chest. Are you sure? I asked, my voice trembling. She didn't answer. Instead, she climbed into the opening, her small figure disappearing into the dark. I didn't have time to think. I followed her, my instincts pushing me forward, even though every part of me screamed to stop. The stairs creaked underfoot as we descended, and I could feel the temperature dropping with every step. We reached the bottom, and I could just make out the faint outline of something in the darkness. As my eyes adjusted, I saw a wall, lined with strange symbols carved into the stone. It was as if we had stepped into another world. I reached out to touch the wall, and the moment my fingers made contact, a low hum filled the air. The ground beneath my feet shook, and I stumbled back, my heart racing. Something was happening. Something I wasn't ready for. The girl stood motionless, her gaze fixed on the symbols. This is it, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum. The truth. My mind was spinning, the pieces of the puzzle slowly coming together, but not fast enough. What had I just uncovered? And why was it so important? I didn't know, but I was about to find out. I stood frozen in the dim light of the underground room, the hum of the symbols on the wall vibrating through the air. The girl, still motionless, stared at the carvings with a look of complete focus, as if they were speaking to her in a language I couldn't understand. I tried to catch my breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. Every instinct told me to turn back, but something deeper, the same feeling that had drawn me here, kept me rooted to the spot. What was this place? What did all of this mean? The symbols on the wall seemed to shift as the hum grew louder, more insistent. I reached out slowly, my hand trembling, and touched the stone. Immediately, a shock of cold shot through my fingers, and the floor beneath me rumbled, as if the entire room was awakening. My heart raced. The girl didn't move, but her eyes flicked to me. It's starting, she whispered. Her voice was steady, calm. I had no idea what she meant, but the tension in the air was palpable. I could feel something about to unfold, something that was going to change everything. As I pulled my hand back from the wall, the hum shifted into a low, rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat. A door I hadn't noticed before, hidden in the far corner of the room, creaked open. I didn't know whether it was my mind playing tricks or whether the room itself was shifting, but the door seemed to call to me. "We need to go," I said, my voice urgent, though it was clear the girl had been expecting this. She nodded without a word, walking toward the door with a confidence I didn't share. The air grew colder as we approached the threshold. I could barely see beyond it, just darkness stretching into the unknown. The girl didn't hesitate. She stepped through the doorway, and I followed, my pulse quickening. The hallway beyond was narrow, its stone walls covered in the same symbols as the room we had just left. It felt like we were moving deeper into something ancient, something forgotten. I kept my eyes on the girl, unsure of where this would lead, but knowing I couldn't turn back now. We walked for what felt like an eternity, the only sound our footsteps echoing in the silence. Eventually, the hallway opened into a cavernous chamber. I looked around, trying to take it all in. The room was filled with old stone pillars, and in the center, there was a large, round table covered in dust. On the table, laid a collection of old scrolls, maps, and books, each one older than the last. It was clear that whatever secrets this place held, they were buried here, waiting to be discovered. The girl stepped forward and began to sift through the papers. "This is it," she said quietly. "This is the truth." I watched her carefully, my mind racing. Was she really just a child? She seemed far too composed for someone so young. She turned to me, her face still serious. "The truth about everything." Her words sent a chill through me. "What does that mean?" I asked, stepping closer to the table. She held up one of the maps. It was old, the edges torn, but the markings on it were unmistakable. It showed a location, somewhere deep in the mountains, far from any known town. My gut twisted. I had a feeling that whatever was hidden there would change everything. "You need to understand," she said, her voice now softer, almost apologetic. "This is not just about you. It never was." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" She looked at me, her eyes now filled with an intensity one hadn't seen before. "The truth you're looking for, the truth in this room, could ruin kingdoms. It's bigger than all of us." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was no longer about finding a secret or solving a mystery. This was about uncovering something that could bring down everything I had ever known. The girl stepped back, as if giving me space to process what she had just said. I didn't know what to think. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my voice hoarse. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked over to the wall and brushed away the dust from a hidden carving. It was a symbol I hadn't seen before, much more intricate, much more detailed. "Because it's time," she said simply. "Time for you to see what's behind all of this." She placed her hand on the symbol, and suddenly, the floor beneath us shifted. I stumbled back, barely catching myself. The walls began to tremble as if the entire chamber was waking from a long slumber. The girl stood there, unfazed, as the room seemed to come to life around us. I could barely make sense of it. Everything was happening too fast, too intensely. The floor opened up in front of us, revealing a hidden passage leading even deeper into the earth. I swallowed hard. This was it. The truth was down there, waiting for us. I knew I had no choice but to follow, but a part of me, deep down, was terrified of what we might find. The girl looked back at me, her expression unreadable. "Are you ready?" she asked. I didn't know if I was, but I nodded, knowing I couldn't turn back now. We stepped into the darkness, together, and the door slammed shut behind us. I followed her down the narrow passage, the air growing thicker with every step. The walls seemed to close in around us, the dim light from the tunnel barely illuminating the path ahead. I could feel the weight of what we were doing pressing down on me, but I couldn't stop now. The girl led the way, moving with the confidence of someone who had been here before, like she knew exactly where she was going, like she had been waiting for this moment for a long time. The further we walked, the more the tunnel seemed to stretch into the unknown, the silence broken only by the sound of our footsteps and the occasional drip of water echoing through the stone. The walls around us were covered in strange markings, almost identical to the symbols in the room above. Each one seemed to pulse with an energy I couldn't quite understand. My mind was racing with questions, but there was one thing that kept repeating in my head. What truth was she talking about? What could possibly be hidden down here, in a place that had been forgotten for so long? The girl's voice broke the silence, her words steady, as if she had been rehearsing them for years. This is the last part of the journey, she said. Once we reach the end, you'll understand everything. I looked at her, but she didn't meet my gaze. She was focused on the path ahead, her small figure silhouetted against the darkness. How do you know all this? I asked, my voice quieter than I intended. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowed her pace, and I caught up to her. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I've been chosen, she said simply. Chosen? I repeated, confused. For what? She didn't answer directly. Instead, she reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small, weathered book. She held it out to me. This will explain it, she said, her voice almost reverent. I took the book from her, its leather cover cracked with age. As I opened it, the first page was covered in the same symbols I had seen earlier. The rest of the pages were filled with cryptic writing, things I couldn't make sense of, but somehow, it felt familiar. I flipped through the pages slowly, my fingers brushing over the ink, each word feeling like a key unlocking something deep inside me. Suddenly, the tunnel around us began to change. The walls started to shift, the air thickened, and the sound of something moving echoed through the passage. My heart started to race. I turned to the girl, my breath coming in short gasps. What's happening? I asked, but she was already moving faster, her steps quickening. We're close, she said. It's almost time. We reached a small chamber at the end of the tunnel. In the center of the room was a pedestal, and on top of it lay a glowing object. It pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, like a heartbeat. The girl approached the pedestal slowly, her face serious. I followed, my heart pounding in my chest. What is it? I asked, but she didn't respond. Instead, she reached out and touched the object. The moment her fingers made contact, the room seemed to tremble, the light growing brighter, almost blinding. The ground beneath us shook violently, and I stumbled, barely managing to keep my balance. The girl's eyes flashed with something I couldn't place, a mixture of fear and determination. It's done, she said, her voice barely audible over the noise. The truth is revealed. The pedestal began to sink into the ground, revealing a hidden chamber beneath it. I looked down into the darkness below, unable to see what lay within, but I could feel it. The air was charged with energy, thick with the promise of something that could change everything. I reached for the girl's hand instinctively, but she pulled away, stepping forward. This is where we part ways, she said, her voice cold now. You have to do this alone. I stared at her in disbelief. What? You can't just leave me here. I protested, but she shook her head. You're ready, she said. You've always been ready. This is your path now. Before I could respond, she turned and walked back toward the tunnel, disappearing into the darkness. I was alone. The chamber was silent except for the hum of the object on the pedestal, now dimming. I could feel its power, its pull, urging me to take the next step. Slowly, I approached the pedestal, my hand reaching out toward the object. The moment my fingers touched it, the world around me seemed to shatter. Everything went dark, and a vision filled my mind. Images, fragments of the past and future, rushed at me. I saw kingdoms falling, secrets revealed, and the lives of those I loved being torn apart. And in the middle of it all was me, holding the key to everything. I pulled my hand back, gasping for breath. The vision was gone, but the weight of it remained, heavy in my chest. I knew what I had to do. The truth was out there, waiting for me, and I was going to find it, no matter the cost. I stood frozen, the weight of what had just transpired pressing down on me. The glowing object on the pedestal flickered out, leaving the room in darkness, except for the faint outline of the girl's figure disappearing into the shadows. I couldn't move. My heart raced as the pieces of what I had just experienced started to settle in. The vision, the truth, it was all so overwhelming. The pedestal had sunk back into the ground, and now only the empty chamber remained, eerily silent. I had touched the object, felt its power, and in return, it had shown me what was hidden in the darkness, things that were never meant to be known. I stumbled back, my breath coming in. Short gasps. The truth was revealed, but it came at a cost. I had seen kingdoms fall, lives shattered, and families torn apart by the very secret I was now connected to. What was I supposed to do with this knowledge? The girl had disappeared, leaving me to face this new reality on my own. It felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me, and I was falling into something far deeper than I could have ever imagined. My mind was a blur of images and voices, the haunting vision of the future echoing in my thoughts. And yet, beneath it all, there was a sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do. The truth I had uncovered wasn't just some forgotten secret. It was a weapon, one that could reshape everything. I had seen it in the vision. The girl had warned me, and now I understood why. The key I held in my hand was more than just a symbol. It was the key to a power that had been hidden for centuries, a power that could destroy everything in its path. As the silence stretched on, I realized that I couldn't turn back. There was no escaping what had been revealed. The truth was out, and it was in my hands. The room felt colder now, the hum from the pedestal replaced by the heavy silence. I could still feel the pulse of the object, deep inside me, vibrating through my bones. The weight of the choice ahead of me was unbearable. I had seen what would happen if I used the knowledge I had gained, but I had also seen the consequences of leaving it buried. There was no right answer, only the certainty that something had to be done. My fingers tightened around the book the girl had given me. It was still warm from my touch, and I could feel the weight of the history within its pages. I couldn't let it slip away, not now. I had to understand it, every word, every symbol, every meaning hidden in its text. I turned back to the pedestal, my mind racing with questions. What was the true purpose of the objects in this place? What had the girl been trying to tell me? I needed answers, and I needed them fast. But I also knew that the longer I stayed here, the more dangerous this all became. I couldn't afford to hesitate. I had to move forward. With one last glance at the now empty chamber, I turned and walked toward the exit, the book clutched tightly in my hand. The darkness seemed to press in on me as I made my way back through the tunnel, the walls closing in tighter with each step. I could feel it, the weight of the truth on my shoulders. I was being pulled toward something bigger, something that could change everything. And yet, I couldn't help but wonder if I was the one who was being changed in the process. The girl's words echoed in my mind as I reached the end of the tunnel. It's time. What did she mean by that? Was I truly ready to face the consequences of what I had uncovered? The tunnel opened into the night, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I stepped outside, blinking against the brightness of the stars above. But there was no time to stop. I had to go to the place the book had revealed, to the heart of the mystery. And as I walked into the night, the weight of my decision heavy on my chest, I knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. Whatever I had uncovered, whatever power I now held, I would have to face it. And I would have to make a choice that would shape the future, no matter the cost. I walked through the cold night, the wind biting at my skin as the weight of what had just happened pressed on me. The truth was heavy, more than I had ever imagined. It was all coming together now, the strange symbols, the visions, and the girl's cryptic words. The book I carried felt like a lifeline, but it was also a curse. It held secrets that could tear everything apart, and I had no idea what to do with it. I had seen the power it contained, the power that could bring down kingdoms. It was the kind of power that could reshape the world, for better or for worse. My mind raced as I walked, each step echoing in the quiet night. I knew I had to find out more, but where would I go? Who could I trust? The girl had disappeared, and I was left alone to face the consequences. I thought back to the chamber, to the pedestal and the object that had revealed so much. What was it? And why had I been chosen to uncover its secrets? There were more questions than answers, and I had no choice but to find them. As I neared the edge of town, the familiar road seemed different. Everything felt off, like I was walking through a dream. The town had always been quiet, peaceful even, but now it felt like a ticking time bomb, waiting to explode. I had no idea who else was involved in this, but I knew that there were others out there. People who wanted the truth, just like I did. And they wouldn't stop until they got it. My phone buzzed in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. I pulled it out, checking the screen. It was an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me to answer. Hello, I said, my voice tense. There was a brief pause on the other end, and then a low voice spoke. You don't know what you're dealing with. The voice was gruff, but there was an edge of fear in it, as if the person on the other end knew something I didn't. Who is this? I asked, my heart racing. It doesn't matter who I am, the voice said. What matters is that you're in way over your head. That book you're carrying. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, the words echoing in my mind. That book you're carrying. What did they mean? Who knew about the book? And why had they warned me? I had to find out. My mind was swirling, but I knew I couldn't waste any more time. I had to get to the bottom of this. The next morning, I decided to go to the one place I thought might hold the answers, an old library on the outskirts of town. It was a long shot, but something told me I had to go there. I could feel the tension in the air as I pulled into the gravel parking lot. The library was old, its walls weathered by time, but it had always been a place of quiet, a place to think. I stepped inside, the smell of dust and old paper filling my nostrils. The librarian, an older woman with sharp eyes, looked up from behind her desk as I approached. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice as stern as ever. I nodded, not sure where to start. "I'm looking for information on an ancient symbol," I said, pulling out the book. The woman's expression changed the moment she saw it. She stood up quickly, her eyes scanning the cover. "Where did you find that?" she asked, her voice low. I didn't answer immediately. "It's important," I said finally. "I need to know everything about it." The librarian hesitated for a moment, then nodded. "Follow me," she said, walking briskly toward the back of the library. We passed rows of shelves, the sound of our footsteps echoing in the silence. She led me to a small, hidden room at the back, where old manuscripts and books were stored. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp hanging overhead. She gestured for me to sit at the table in the center of the room. "This," she said, "is not just any book." She seemed to be weighing her words carefully. "It contains knowledge that was hidden for a reason. Not many people know about it, but it has been passed down through generations. Those who sought it out, they paid the price." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do you mean?" I asked. The librarian looked at me gravely. "There are those who will do anything to get their hands on that book, on the power it holds. You don't know the danger you're in." I looked down at the book in my hands, my fingers tracing the edges of the pages. The weight of her words hung in the air. I had already seen the power it held, the power to change everything. But I didn't understand how or why. "How do I stop it?" I asked. The librarian's gaze hardened. "You can't stop it," she said, her voice a whisper. "But you can try to control it. If you can find the key to unlocking its full potential, you may have a chance. But you'll need to be careful. There are others, more dangerous than you can imagine, who will stop at nothing to get their hands on it." I nodded slowly, the realization settling in. This wasn't just some old book. It was the key to something much bigger. Something that could destroy everything. And now, I was part of it. As I left the library, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The weight of what I now knew felt suffocating. I had opened a door, and now there was no going back. I stepped out of the library, the weight of the librarian's words still hanging in the air. The streets felt colder than they had before, the shadows longer, stretching like fingers across the pavement. The knowledge that the book held a power beyond anything I could comprehend was overwhelming, and yet, the sense of urgency in my chest told me there was no time to waste. The librarian had been clear. There were others who would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. I had already seen the effects of the truth in the visions, but now I was in too deep to turn back. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that someone, or something, was tracking my every move. It wasn't paranoia. Something in the air had shifted, as if the world itself was aware of the secrets I had uncovered. I glanced around, but the street was empty. Just the usual quiet, a few cars parked on the side, the occasional pedestrian walking by, heads down, lost in their own thoughts. Yet, something felt off. I made my way toward my car, but as I neared the parking lot, I noticed a figure standing by the corner of the building. His silhouette was dark, almost blending into the shadows. He wasn't moving. My heart skipped a beat. He was watching me. I had no idea who he was, but I knew that look. It was the look of someone who knew exactly who I was, who knew what I was carrying. I turned toward him, trying to act casual, but inside, every alarm bell was ringing. As I took a step forward, he suddenly straightened up and started walking toward me. The streetlights cast long shadows, and I could see his face more clearly now. It was hard to place his age, but his eyes, those eyes told me everything. They were cold, calculating, like a predator sizing up its prey. I stopped in my tracks, unwilling to show any fear. You have something that doesn't belong to you, he said, his voice low but clear. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I didn't say anything at first. I wasn't sure how to respond, but I knew this wasn't a coincidence. This wasn't just some random person. What do you want? I finally asked, my voice steady despite the racing in my chest. He stopped just a few feet from me. I want what's mine, he said, his eyes narrowing. Give me the book. I felt a chill run down my spine. There it was, the reason I had been so afraid. Whoever this man was, he was here for the same thing I was. Who are you? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He smirked, a cold, humorless smile. Let's just say I'm someone who knows exactly what you're dealing with. And you're in over your head. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I could feel the weight of the book in my pocket, as if it was burning a hole through my jacket. I didn't know what this man knew, but I knew I couldn't give it to him. Not without understanding why he wanted it so badly. I don't know who you are, but I'm not giving you the book, I said, taking a step back. You don't have a choice, he replied, his voice becoming more menacing. Hand it over, or things will get a lot worse for you. I felt a surge of adrenaline as I realized this wasn't just a threat. This was real. He wasn't going to back down. I looked around, trying to find a way out, but the street was still empty. No one was around to help. It was just him and me, and I was beginning to realize how much danger I was really in. I couldn't keep running. I had no choice but to stand my ground. I don't know who you are, but I won't let you take it from me, I said, my voice firmer now. The man didn't say anything at first. He just stared at me, as if sizing me up. Then, without warning, he reached into his jacket and pulled out something that gleamed in the light, a gun. My heart stopped for a moment. I knew right then that this wasn't just a conversation. This was a threat to my life. He pointed the gun at me, his expression cold. I've been hunting that book for years. You don't know what it's capable of, do you? He asked. I stood frozen, my mind racing. This wasn't just about me anymore. This wasn't just about protecting a secret. The power in that book could change everything, and it seemed like everyone wanted it for themselves. I'm not giving it to you, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. You can try to take it from me, but I won't let you. The man's lips curled into a grin. You'll regret this, he said, his voice dripping with malice. But before he could take another step, a car screeched to a halt behind me. I didn't even have to look. I could hear the sound of engines revving, the unmistakable roar of motorcycles. A few seconds later, I heard voices, and the man in front of me turned around. His expression changed instantly, from confidence to panic. I didn't know who they were, but the arrival of the motorcycles had thrown him off. The sound of the engines grew louder, and then a voice shouted, "Step away from him." I turned to see several bikers approaching, their leather jackets gleaming in the streetlight. They surrounded the man in seconds, and just as quickly as he had appeared, he was outnumbered. He backed away slowly, his eyes darting between the bikers. "This isn't over," he spat, before turning and disappearing into the night. I stood there, my heart still pounding, as the bikers closed in. "You okay?" one of them asked, his voice rough but kind. I nodded, still in shock. I had no idea who they were, but they had just saved my life. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. "Thanks." The biker nodded, his eyes scanning the dark street. "No problem," he said. "But you're not safe yet. We need to get you out of here." I stood there, my heart still pounding from the close encounter. The bikers had surrounded me, their presence both reassuring and intimidating at the same time. They were dressed in the kind of gear that told you they weren't to be messed with: leather jackets, heavy boots, and the unmistakable patch that marked them as part of the Hells Angels. They were here to protect me, or so it seemed, but something in the air made me question whether I was truly safe. One of the bikers, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, stepped forward. He eyed me for a moment, his gaze sharp, calculating. "You all right?" he asked, his voice gruff, but there was a kindness behind it. I nodded, still trying to gather my bearings. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. "Thanks for the help." The biker nodded, then turned to the others. "We need to move. They're going to be back, and they won't stop until they get what they want." I didn't need to ask who they were. It was obvious now. The man who had threatened me wanted the book. But why? What was so important about it? And who else was out there, hunting for it? I had no answers, only more questions. I couldn't shake the feeling that this was bigger than just me. The book held power, power that could change the world or destroy it. The bikers motioned for me to follow, and I did without hesitation, knowing that staying out here was a death sentence. We moved quickly through the streets, the sound of motorcycle engines echoing in the night. I kept my head down, trying to stay inconspicuous. As we neared the edge of town, I looked back and noticed that the streetlights seemed dimmer than before. The quiet night had taken on a menacing quality. The bikers seemed to sense it too. "We're close to the safe house," the biker with the scar said. "Once we're inside, you'll be able to lay low until we figure out what to do next." I nodded, my thoughts racing. A safe house. The word didn't comfort me as much as it should have. I had no idea who these people were, why they were helping me, or what kind of danger they were really in. But I didn't have much of a choice. I couldn't go back to my old life, not with the book in my possession. It was a target on my back. We arrived at a dilapidated warehouse on the outskirts of town. It didn't look like much, but the bikers seemed to know it well. As we entered, I could feel the tension in the air. The place was a fortress in its own way, barricaded windows, reinforced doors, and a couple of guards posted at the entrance. It was the kind of place you didn't want to be found. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of oil and metal. Motorcycles were parked haphazardly in the corner, their engines silent for the moment. There was a long table in the center of the room, covered with maps, blueprints, and old documents. The biker with the scar motioned for me to sit. I did, feeling the weight of the situation finally crash down on me. "We'll get you some food and rest," he said, his tone softer now. "You need to be at your best if you're going to make it through this." I nodded, my stomach growling in agreement. But I wasn't just hungry for food. I was hungry for answers. "Who were those people?" I asked. "The ones after the book." The biker didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a deep breath, as if he was weighing how much to tell me. "You don't want to know who they are," he said finally. "But you should know what they want. The book you're holding isn't just any book. It's a key to something that's been hidden for centuries. The kind of power that can topple governments, take down entire empires." I felt a chill run down my spine. I had known the book was dangerous, but hearing it put into words made it real in a way that nothing else had. "So what now?" I asked. The biker leaned forward, his eyes meeting mine with an intensity one couldn't ignore. "Now we fight. We hold on to the book, keep it safe, and try to figure out how to use it before they do." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the book anymore. It was about something bigger, something that had been set in motion long before I had ever touched that ancient leather cover. The biker with the scar stood up. "Get some rest," he said. "Tomorrow, we start planning." As he left the room, I couldn't help but wonder if I would make it through this. I had already seen the future. What would happen if the wrong people got their hands on the book? And yet, I knew I couldn't back down. I was in this now, and there was no turning back. The weight of what I was holding, the responsibility of what it meant, was starting to sink in. I wasn't just a person trying to survive anymore. I was part of something much larger than myself. And I had no idea what that meant for my future, or for the world. I woke up the next morning to the sound of distant engines revving outside the warehouse. The air was thick with anticipation, the kind that hung over a battlefield before the first shot was fired. I had barely slept. The weight of the book was like a stone in my chest, pressing down on me, its secrets alive in my mind, swirling, demanding action. As the light from the early morning sun filtered through the cracks in the old building, I tried to shake off the unease that had followed me through the night. I wasn't just holding a book anymore. I was holding a key. The key to something bigger, something more dangerous than I had ever imagined. And there were others who would stop at nothing to take it from me. I stood up slowly, feeling the ache in my muscles from the tension of the past few days. I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. I could hear voices outside, the bikers preparing for whatever came next. The scarred man had said we were going to fight, but fight for what? The book was a danger to everyone, including myself, and keeping it was becoming more and more of a liability. There was a part of me that wanted to run, to hide, but I knew it wasn't an option. Not anymore. I had already made my choice when I decided to pick up the book. Now, I had to face the consequences. I stepped out into the main room of the warehouse, where the bikers were gathered around a table, maps and papers spread out in front of them. They looked up as I entered, their faces hard, their eyes sharp. It was clear that they were used to dealing with danger, but I could see the concern in their eyes when they saw me. They were all waiting for me to speak. "What's the plan?" I asked, my voice steady but carrying the weight of everything that had happened. The biker with the scar, the one who had been leading this group, looked at me with a mixture of respect and something darker, something that said he knew this was going to get worse before it got better. "We move out at sundown," he said. "There's a place in the mountains, not far from here. It's an old church, hidden from the world. It's the only place we can protect the book." I frowned, the location not making sense to me. "What's so special about this church?" I asked. The biker leaned in, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It's a safe house, a place the club has used for generations. If anyone can keep the book hidden, it's there." I didn't know whether to trust him, but I had no better options. "How long will it take to get there?" I asked. "A few hours, give or take," he replied. "We'll move fast, but we have to be careful. They'll be watching us. They know you have the book." I nodded, a feeling of dread settling in my stomach. "And when we get there?" I asked. "Then we figure out what to do with it," he said. "The book's dangerous, but we need to know what it's capable of. It's not just about hiding it anymore. It's about understanding what it can do." The room fell silent, the gravity of his words hanging in the air. The bikers exchanged glances, and I could see the fear in their eyes. They were all in this with me, whether they liked it or not. But the truth was, none of us really understood what we were up against. We were all playing a game that was far beyond us. The scarred biker stood up, his movements deliberate. "All right," he said, his tone serious. "We get ready to leave. You," he looked at me. "Keep the book close. We don't know who's watching, but we know they're out there." I took the book from my bag, the weight of it heavy in my hands. It felt like a ticking time bomb, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I didn't figure out how to control it soon, everything would fall apart. I turned the book over in my hands, the strange symbols on the cover still a mystery. The secrets inside could change the course of history, but at what cost? The door to the warehouse creaked open, and one of the other bikers stepped in. "We're ready," he said, his voice tense. Without another word, we gathered our things and began to move. The air outside was crisp, the sun barely rising over the horizon. We mounted our bikes, the sound of engines roaring to life filling the still morning. As we drove down the winding road, the world seemed to blur around me. I couldn't help but feel that the clock was ticking. Every moment that passed was one step closer to someone finding out what I had. And once they did, there would be no turning back. The mountains loomed ahead, their jagged peaks barely visible in the distance. I gripped the handlebars tighter, my mind racing. What would happen when we got to the church? And would I be ready for whatever lay ahead? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. There was no going back now. I had already stepped into a world where the stakes were higher than I ever could have imagined. And the truth was, I wasn't sure I was ready for what was coming next. I could feel the tension rising with every mile we covered, the mountain roads becoming steeper, winding through thick forests that seemed to stretch on forever. The bikers around me kept their distance, their eyes scanning the roads and the trees, alert for any sign of danger. The book was still in my bag, its weight a constant reminder of the power it held. I had no idea what we were about to face, but I knew one thing. Once we reached the church, everything would change. We had been riding for hours, the cold mountain air biting at my skin, when we finally saw the outline of the church ahead. It was old, nestled at the base of the mountains, its stone walls weathered by time and hidden by the dense trees that surrounded it. The church had a quiet, eerie presence, as if it had been waiting for us to arrive. We slowed down as we approached, the sound of our engines echoing in the stillness. The scarred biker led the way, his eyes scanning the area, making sure the coast was clear. He signaled for the others to stop, and we all dismounted, the gravel crunching beneath our boots. "Stay close," he said, his voice low but firm. "We don't know who's watching." We approached the church slowly, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders. I could feel the eyes of the bikers on me, the uncertainty in the air. What were we going to find inside? And why had this place been chosen to hide the book? As we reached the door, the scarred biker pulled out a key and unlocked it with a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing the dark interior. The air inside was cool and musty, the smell of old wood and stone filling my lungs. The light from the outside barely penetrated the darkness, and I could barely make out the rows of pews and the faded stained glass windows. The biker led the way inside, and we followed, the sound of our footsteps muted in the vast silence of the church. As we moved deeper into the building, the scarred biker stopped in front of an old altar, covered in dust and cobwebs. He turned to face us, his expression grim. "This is where we make our stand," he said. "The church is safe for now, but we can't stay here forever." I looked around, trying to make sense of the place. There were no signs of life, no indication of who had used this church before us. It was as if it had been abandoned for years, left to decay in the solitude of the mountains. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The biker's eyes locked onto mine, his gaze intense. "We wait," he said. "They'll come for us soon. They always do." I felt a chill run down my spine at his words. Who was he talking about? Who were they? The truth in the book was powerful, but it was also dangerous, and it seemed like everyone wanted a piece of it. As the hours dragged on, the tension in the church grew. The bikers were on edge, moving from window to window, peering out into the darkness. I could feel it too. Something was coming. I didn't know what, but I could sense the danger closing in. The night seemed to stretch on forever, the only sound the soft rustling of the trees outside and the occasional distant howl of an animal. Finally, just as the first light of dawn began to break through the stained glass, the sound of engines filled the air. My heart skipped a beat as the noise grew louder, unmistakable now. "They're here," the scarred biker said, his voice steady but urgent. "Get ready." The doors of the church suddenly burst open, and a group of men in dark clothing stormed inside, their faces obscured by masks. They moved quickly, efficiently, like a well-trained unit. The bikers reacted instantly, grabbing their weapons and positioning themselves around the room. I stood frozen, my mind racing. Who were these people? What did they want with the book? The masked men didn't waste any time. They moved toward me, their leader stepping forward. "Hand over the book," he said, his voice cold and commanding. I felt the weight of the book in my bag, the familiar pull of its power. I couldn't let them have it. "You're too late," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "It's already too dangerous for anyone to control." The leader didn't react, his eyes narrowing. "We'll see about that," he said, before signaling for his men to close in. The room erupted into chaos. Guns were drawn, and the sound of footsteps and shouting filled the air. The bikers fought back, but the masked men were relentless. The scarred biker moved quickly, firing at one of the intruders, but they were too many. I felt a surge of panic, my heart racing as I looked around for an escape. Then, in the midst of the chaos, I saw a figure move toward the altar, toward the book. I had no choice now. I couldn't let them take it. I reached for the book in my bag, feeling the familiar weight in my hands as I prepared to make a move. But before I could act, I heard a voice call out from the shadows. "Stop!" It was the girl. She stepped into the room, her eyes blazing with determination. "The book is not for you," she said, her voice strong. The room fell silent as the masked men turned to her, confusion flashing across their faces. "What do you mean?" the leader asked, his voice low. "It's mine." The girl shook her head. "It's not. You've been looking for the wrong thing all along." And with that, the truth began to unfold. The room fell silent as the girl's words hung in the air, a heavy weight settling over everyone present. The masked men, their weapons still raised, froze at her command. Even the scarred biker, who had been leading the charge, looked taken aback. No one had expected this. The girl, standing tall in the center of the chaos, locked eyes with the leader of the intruders. "You've been looking for the wrong thing," she repeated, her voice unwavering. "The book is not yours to take. It's mine to protect, just like it was meant to be." Her presence was commanding, and the men surrounding us seemed unsure whether to advance or retreat. The leader's hand tightened on the gun in his grip, but he didn't speak. The girl stepped forward, her gaze never leaving his. "You think you understand the power within that book," she said, her voice growing colder. "But you don't. It's not just a weapon. It's a key. And if you unlock it, you'll destroy everything, including yourselves." I watched as the leader hesitated, clearly conflicted. He looked to his men for support, but they remained unmoving. For a moment, the tension in the room seemed to stretch on endlessly. The scarred biker, who had been watching the standoff with suspicion, finally spoke. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice demanding an answer. The girl turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "I'm the last line of defense," she said simply. "The book has been passed down through generations, and now it's my turn to protect it." There was a pause before she continued. I'm not alone in this. There are others, waiting for the right moment. They will help me keep the book hidden, if necessary. But if you want it, you'll have to go through me. The leader seemed to weigh her words, his expression unreadable. Slowly, he lowered his weapon, signaling to his men to do the same. The tension didn't disappear entirely, but it lessened. You think you can stop us? He asked, his voice low and dangerous. We've been hunting that book for years. We won't let you stand in our way. The girl stood her ground. You don't understand, she said, her eyes narrowing. The book is more than just a tool for power. It's a part of something ancient. If you unleash its full potential, you'll unleash chaos. The world won't survive it. I could feel the weight of her words sinking in. The truth that had been revealed to me, the truth that the book held the potential to destroy everything, was now clear. But there was more to it. The girl knew more, and she wasn't sharing all of it. The leader, though defeated, for the moment, wasn't ready to let go. You don't get it, do you? He said, his voice thick with disdain. People like us, we don't back down. We don't care about the consequences. We want the power. The world doesn't need to survive if we're the ones in charge. The girl's eyes flashed, and for a brief moment, I saw a glimmer of something darker in her expression. You'll be the first to fall, she said coldly. The silence that followed was heavy. The bikers who had been watching the scene unfold now exchanged glances, unsure of what to do next. But I knew the girl was right. The power in that book wasn't something to be played with. And yet, the people hunting it weren't going to stop. I glanced at the scarred biker, who was still holding his gun, his eyes fixed on the leader. It was clear that he wasn't ready to trust the girl, but at the same time, I could sense a shift in him. There was something about her that commanded respect. What do we do now? I asked, my voice low. The scarred biker met my gaze, his expression unreadable. We move, he said, his voice calm but firm. We get the hell out of here, and we figure out what to do next. The girl nodded, seemingly in agreement. We need to find a way to keep the book safe, she said. There are still people out there who won't stop until they get their hands on it. The leader, seeing that he had lost his advantage, turned on his heel and motioned for his men to follow. This isn't over, he said, his voice filled with venom. We'll be back. And next time, you won't be so lucky. With that, he and his men retreated, disappearing into the shadows. I let out a breath I didn't realize I had been holding. The immediate danger had passed, but the war wasn't over. The girl looked at me, her expression softer now. We need to get moving, she said. We don't have much time. I nodded, my mind still racing. I had no idea what the future held, but one thing was certain, we couldn't stay here. As we left the church behind, the weight of the book seemed even heavier, and the road ahead felt uncertain. But we had no choice but to move forward. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered, and I was about to find out just how far I was willing to go to protect it. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was closing in on us. The tension in the air was almost unbearable as we left the church behind. The bikers moved quickly, their engines roaring as they powered down the mountain roads. I followed closely behind, my thoughts racing. The book, the truth, the people who were after it, everything was spinning out of control. The girl had been right. The people hunting the book would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. And I was caught in the middle of it all. The sky was still dark, the first hints of dawn barely visible over the horizon. The cold mountain air cut through my jacket, but it wasn't just the cold I felt. It was the weight of the situation. I had no idea what was coming next. The book, with its secrets, held power that could change everything. It could save lives, or it could destroy them. I didn't know who to trust anymore. The scarred biker had been right when he said we couldn't stay at the church. The people after us would find it, and then there would be no hiding. But where could we go? The only place left was a safe house deep in the mountains, a place where the club had hidden things before. As we rode, I couldn't help but feel the eyes of the world on me. Every movement, every glance, felt like a silent warning. We had no time to waste. The road twisted and turned beneath us, the darkness of the trees looming on either side. The bikers stayed silent, their focus fixed on the road ahead. I looked over at the girl, still riding ahead of me. She was calm, almost serene, as if this was all part of the plan. But I knew better. This wasn't just about hiding the book. It was about protecting the world from what it could unleash. We finally reached the safe house, a small cabin hidden among the trees. It looked abandoned, its windows dark, the door slightly ajar. The bikers pulled up, dismounting quickly and moving inside. I followed, my heart racing. The inside of the cabin was dimly lit, the air stale and musty. It felt like a place that had been forgotten by time. The scarred biker moved to the corner, checking his gear, while the others stood guard near the door. The girl took a seat at the table, her eyes scanning the room as she spoke. "We don't have much time," she said, her voice calm but urgent. "They'll find us here, too, if we don't act fast." I could feel the pressure building, the realization settling in. The clock was ticking, and we had no idea when the next attack would come. But there was one thing I was sure of: we couldn't keep running forever. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice strained. The scarred biker looked up from his gear, his expression grim. "We figure out how to use the book," he said. "It's the only way we can stop them. But first, we need to understand what we're dealing with." I nodded, though I didn't fully understand what that meant. The book was powerful, but it was also dangerous. I had seen the visions, felt the pull of the truth within it. But how could we control something so volatile? The girl stood up, walking toward me. "You need to open it," she said softly. "You need to read it." I hesitated, the weight of her words hanging in the air. The book had shown me glimpses of the future, but I wasn't sure I was ready for the rest. "Are you sure?" I asked. "What if I can't control it?" She looked at me, her expression unreadable. "You have no choice. If you don't open it, they will." Her words hit me like a blow. There was no going back now. I took the book from my bag, feeling its weight in my hands. The leather was worn, the pages fragile, but it held a strange energy that seemed to hum in the air. I opened it carefully, the pages creaking as I turned them. The symbols on the pages were familiar, but there was something different this time. The words seemed to shift and change, like they were alive, like they were watching me. I tried to focus, to make sense of what I was seeing. But the more I read, the more the words blurred together. It was like the book was pushing me, forcing me to understand its secrets. "It's not just about the power," the girl said, her voice breaking through my thoughts. "It's about the balance. You have to understand the balance." I looked up at her, confused. "What balance?" I asked. "The balance between what's real and what's not," she said. "The book doesn't just show the future. It shows what could happen, what might happen, depending on the choices we make. But if you're not careful, you could change everything, and not in the way you want." The weight of her words hit me hard. I realized then that the book wasn't just a tool to be used. It was a weapon that could destroy everything if I wasn't careful. The room seemed to grow colder, the silence growing deeper. I closed the book, my mind spinning. What was I supposed to do with all of this? How could I possibly control something so powerful, so dangerous? I looked around at the bikers, but none of them had the answers. The girl was right. We had no choice but to move forward, to face whatever came next. But I had no idea how to do that. The book had shown me too much, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to bear the consequences. I stared down at the book in my hands, the weight of its secrets pressing down on me. The room was silent, the only sound the faint rustling of the pages as I held it. It had shown me things that should have never been uncovered. The power it held, the destruction it could cause. It was more than I could comprehend. I had been chosen to protect it, but now I was beginning to wonder if I was the one who needed protecting. The girl was still standing beside me, her eyes fixed on me as if she were waiting for something. "It's time," she said softly, her voice carrying a sense of finality. I looked at her, unsure of what that meant. "Time for what?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped forward, her hand reaching out to touch the book. I instinctively pulled it away, but she only smiled. "You can't keep running from it," she said. "You've seen what the book can do. Now you have to decide what you're going to do with it." I felt a chill run down my spine at her words. I had seen the visions, the destruction, the chaos that the book could cause. But I had also seen the power it held, the potential to change the world. I had no idea what I was supposed to do with that kind of power. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," I said, my voice shaking. "What if I make the wrong choice?" She looked at me, her eyes softening. "There is no right choice," she said. "There's only the one you make. And you have to live with it." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. I had known that the moment I picked up the book, I had stepped into something much bigger than myself. But now, standing here with the weight of the world on my shoulders, I realized that the true test wasn't just about protecting the book, it was about controlling it. I looked around at the bikers, all of whom had gathered in the cabin, their faces tense, their eyes darting to the book as if it were a ticking time bomb. They had trusted me to keep it safe, but now I wasn't so sure I could even trust myself. The room was growing colder, the air thick with anticipation. I could feel the pressure building, the moment of decision drawing closer. I turned to the girl. "What happens if I choose wrong?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She didn't answer right away. She simply stepped back, her gaze never leaving me. "You won't know until it's too late," she said, her tone calm, but laced with an unspoken warning. I swallowed hard, the reality of the situation crashing down on me. There was no going back. I couldn't undo the past, and I couldn't erase what I had already seen. The book was out in the world now, and it was up to me to decide what to do with it. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing. I had to make a choice. It wasn't about the book anymore. It was about the future. What kind of world would I create by holding on to it? And what kind of person would I become by letting it go? The decision was mine. Slowly, I opened my eyes and looked at the bikers. They were waiting for me, there. Eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing. I couldn't let fear control me. "We leave tonight," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm raging inside me. The bikers exchanged glances, but no one objected. The girl nodded, her expression unreadable. "Good," she said simply. "It's time to move." We gathered our things quickly, preparing for the journey ahead. The road was long, and we didn't know where it would lead. But we couldn't stay here any longer. The book was too dangerous, and the people hunting us were getting closer. As we mounted our bikes and rode out into the night, I couldn't help but feel that this was just the beginning. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was the only road we had. And as we rode into the darkness, I realized that the choices I made now would define the future, not just for me, but for the world. The book was still in my possession, and with it, the power to shape everything. But the truth was, I didn't know if I was ready for that kind of responsibility. All I could do was ride, and hope that I would find the answers I was searching for before it was too late.